Welcome to a very special afternoon. As we get this program going, I just want to acknowledge the great work being done by volunteers, these beautiful panels that tell the history of our community and the opportunity we have to learn here today. But as we begin, I would like to acknowledge the land on which we gather. It is the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the shared traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. My name is Riaz Megji, proud Ismaili, and honored to be your MC this afternoon as we navigate a story about what home means to each and every one of us. And today, as we commemorate the progress and contributions of the Ismaili Muslim community here in Canada, we would like to recognize that the program has been co-sponsored by the Ismaili Council for BC, and the Vancouver Art Gallery. And the Vancouver Art Gallery's mission, through art, we create paths to share perspectives, build and engage communities, and shape our collective future together, exemplifies why we are here today. And through the conversation, we will shortly hear about personal reflections and stories of migration and how navigating from one home to a new home has shaped these individuals. It will be an impactful discussion. And this will be followed by your own exploration of this beautiful exhibition if you haven't had the chance to take a look at some of these photos, sentiments, and just great questions all around about what home can mean to each and every one of us. As you can see on the beautiful panels around the room, this exhibit uses a vibrant collage of family photographs, timelines, maps, and historical documents to tell stories of members of the Ismaili Muslim community who have come from all around the world to make this country their home and help build a stronger Canada. And as many of you are coming in, we hope you had the chance to enjoy the beautiful music. I just had the chance to meet our musician. Let's give a warm applause to Mr. Jack Campbell. Jack is obviously a very gifted musician. He is a composer, violinist, and guitarist. He's worked with a wide array of arts organizations, including the Vancouver Art Gallery and Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. So, Jack, thank you again for being with us this afternoon. Quick housekeeping notes. I know we're back together again in person, so cell phones, we just ask that you put your ringers on silent throughout the next hour as we run through the program, and we'll give you a moment to do that. You'll also note there's cameras in the room. Our volunteers are taking video. They're taking photographs of today's session, so there'll be many souvenirs to capture that you'll be able to relive after this one. So it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 50-year exhibit launch here at the Ismaili Centre. And here to help get us started, I have the honor and pleasure of welcoming a good friend and a terrific leader for our community, President Samir Manji, to share some welcoming remarks. President Manji.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it is a personal honor for me to be able to provide welcome remarks for this afternoon's very, very special event. Today, we have with us various individuals representing government, academia, not-for-profit, members of the Ummah who we've worked with, and representatives from the diplomatic community. Specifically, I would like to acknowledge in the audience Senator Mobina Jaffer, Ann Kang, MLA for Burnaby-Deer Lake, Rudy Campbell, City Councillor, City of New Westminster, Joao Costa, Consul General, the Consulate General of Portugal, Manish, Consul General for the Consulate General of India, Ghulam Hussain, Vice Consul for the Consul General of Pakistan, our incredible MC, Riaz Megji, who perhaps needs no introduction, Arran Steffens, co-founder of Nature's Path, Sirish Rao, who we have a wonderful long-standing relationship going back to the Indian Summer Festival, and who now is Director of Public Engagement and Learning at the Vancouver Art Gallery. And Sirish, let me take this opportunity to express to you and to your colleagues at the Art Gallery our very deep gratitude for the opportunity to co-sponsor today's event. I would also like to especially acknowledge and thank Akhil Virani exhibit curator, for putting together such an incredible story. Akil couldn't be with us here today, but I would like to ask you to join me in acknowledging his work and giving him a round of applause. Before continuing my remarks, I would like to acknowledge that earlier this week, a tragic incident took place at the Ismaili Centre, Lisbon, that shocked and saddened the global Ismaili community. We would like to take this message of solidarity and support forward. We would like to thank many who have reached out to the community to express their well wishes, their condolences, their thoughts, and their prayers. As I look out in the audience this afternoon, I see many familiar faces who have been a part of our community's 50-year journey in Canada, particularly here in British Columbia. For some of you and the institutions you represent, these relationships are not the result of one-off events, but rather are the product of very meaningful partnership and collaboration. That, imbued with the ethic of exchange and connection, they symbolize the best of what the country, city, and community have to offer. It is this ethic of partnership which characterizes one of the ethics of the Ismaili community at large. I also see some new faces who have joined us today. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules, particularly on a somewhat sunny Saturday afternoon here in our beautiful city and province. We hope for those who are here for the first time that it is the first of many visits and interactions that you will have with the Ismaili Centre and the Ismaili community, and that we will have the opportunity moving forward to develop and nurture meaningful relationships. As many of you know, this year marks a very special milestone in the life of the Canadian Ismaili Muslim community, as it marks our 50th anniversary of migration and settlement of Ismailis from across the world to Canada. The origins of the Ismaili community in Canada had their beginnings in the early 70s, when Ismailis at that time from East Africa made their way here in difficult circumstances. That first wave of Ismailis who arrived here fleeing political instability found themselves uprooted from their lives and were forced to forge a new path and foundation for themselves in Canada. Today, 50 years later, this foundation of faith and shared values stand firm and has found a renewed expression in the establishment of several Aga Khan Development Network and Imamat institutions in Canada, which includes this very special building that we are in today, the Ismaili Centre Vancouver. The ongoing settlement of the community here in Canada has also been one deeply shaped and supported by the Government of Canada, the work of the Imamat institutions, and guidance from His Highness the Aga Khan. It is a story of partnership built upon the bedrock of shared value systems and a joint commitment to the values of peace, of pluralism, of a respect for diversity and difference, and of the value of service. The Ismaili Centre Vancouver has been part of the fabric of Burnaby and Vancouver for the last 35 plus years. It has and will continue to remain a center of aspiration, of intellectual and cultural exchange, and of artistic expression and creativity. Its courtyard and fountains have played host to Vancouver's renowned Indian Summer Festival. Its social hall has basked in the wisdom of world-class astronomers, scientists, and historians. And its meeting spaces, might I say, have reverberated with vibrant discussion and debate by policymakers in fields as varied as education and law enforcement. It is our hope that the center remain at the confluence of creative and critical conversations of relevance to Canadians from all walks of life. A quote made by His Highness the Aga Khan at the opening of the Ismaili Centre Toronto so eloquently captures the spirit of all Ismaili centers, including here in Vancouver. And that is that the spaces in this center, quote, be filled with the sounds of enrichment, dialogue, and warm human rapport as Ismailis and non-Ismailis share their lives in a healthy, gregarious spirit, end of quote. In conclusion, I would like to end with an excerpt by a speech His Highness made here at the opening of the Ismaili Centre in 1985. Quote, "In the future, I hope that the Ismaili community in Canada, having established the permanency of its home here, will become part of the reservoir of human talent on which this country can draw both nationally and internationally. Its members will be men and women who believe in enterprise and freedom, who are inspired by this country's respect for the individual, who will work to build and strengthen Canada's economy and democratic institutions. Their spirit will be Canadian. Yet from their origin, they will derive an understanding of other countries which can be harnessed to the benefit of that special perspective on international relations which has earned Canada such worldwide respect." End of quote. I would like to end by once again thanking all of you for taking the time to be here with us this afternoon, and I hope you enjoy what I know will be a very engaging and enlightening program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Manji. Before we get to our conversation live here on the stage, our team has put together some special videos to give more context of the story of 50 years of migration. So to hear more about this historic exhibit, we invite you to watch a short clip. President Manji mentioned our curator, Akil Virani. Akil is a Canadian visual artist best known for his community-engaged art projects that explore social issues. So take a look at your screen and let's hear more about the story.
Hello, bonjour, and yali madat. My name is Akil Virani, and I'm a professional visual artist and graphic designer. I was appointed by the Aga Khan Council for Canada as the creative director of the 50 Years of Migration exhibition after my artist residency at the Canadian Museum of Immigration in Halifax. And our goal with this traveling community storytelling exhibition was to commemorate 50 years of Ismaili Muslim migration to Canada, to celebrate our diverse kaleidoscope of Ismaili Muslim migration stories, not only from East Africa, but from Afghanistan, from Iran, from Tajikistan, from Syria, from India, from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, and beyond. People have been asking me, Akil, what was the hardest part of developing the exhibition? Was it the research, the interviews, the graphic design, the audio play? Well, for me, the hardest part was trying to fit so many amazing stories of perseverance and resilience into only so many panels. For me, the process was like trying to fit a rainbow in a suitcase. Thank you so much for all of your overwhelming support. Merci beaucoup à toutes et à tous qui ont aidé avec l'exposition. I hope that you'll enjoy the exhibition, that you'll have some great conversation. I hope that you'll learn something yourself, and I hope that, as well, you'll see yourself reflected in the exhibition. But most of all, I hope that you'll share in my immense pride to be part of our Ismaili Muslim community here in Canada. Thank you.
He's not here, but yeah, let's give it up for Akil. You know, the beauty of that video, the beauty of this exhibition is just the power of story. And I've gone around, you know, before this event started, taking a look at these photos, taking a look at these sentiments. I mean, I look at the one behind me that says 90 days to leave. Imagine what that would feel like. Imagine what building a new home would be like. And if there's one thing this has inspired, is the thought and questions we can ask our community members who have made the journey and who have endured adversity and what that meant to them. And I think about these stories and questions. There's questions I wish I asked my parents about migration, about what it meant to them, but that's the beauty of what we can do today, to just establish a deeper understanding of what this community represents. And, you know, Shalina and Farouk, we were talking beforehand with this event of the idea of home, and that will be the dialogue we have on stage. But I encourage each and every one of you, even before we have this dialogue, to ask yourself, what does home mean to you? And when I think about the home of the Ismaili community, so many thoughts come to mind, but it has been a community that gives and receives unconditional acceptance. And that's why it makes me proud to be in front of you here today to cue up this conversation. And before we get to it, Abid, are we good with the... Yeah, we're good with it? We have one more video for you, which is a brief compilation of the Ismaili Imamat and the Aga Khan Development Network. So let's take a look at this second video.
In 1957, His Highness the Aga Khan became the 49th hereditary Imam of the Shia Ismaili Muslims upon the death of his grandfather, Sir Sultan Muhammad Shah. The Ismaili Imamat goes back 14 centuries to the time of the first Imam, Hazrat Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family. As he donned the ceremonial robe of the Imamat, he also took upon his shoulders the responsibility of improving the quality of life for his community and those amongst whom they lived. One of the ways he did this was through the creation of the Aga Khan Development Network, the AKDN. With extensive projects across Africa and Asia, AKDN works in the areas of health, education, rural development, culture, environment and climate, as well as economic development. It was created to benefit not just the Ismaili community, but society at large. Over the last 65 years through the AKDN, the Aga Khan has established 2 universities, created over 700 medical centers and 200 schools, supported over 600,000 farmers, and provided financial services to over 50 million people, while helping to create millions of jobs, restoring important cultural monuments, and creating conditions for economic advancement across the developing world. The close cooperation between the Imamat and Canada began in 1972, after Canada extended a warm welcome to thousands of Ismailis expelled from Uganda by Idi Amin. The Aga Khans shared values with Canada, including the promotion of pluralism and responding to those in need, has resulted in an agreement of cooperation between the two that affords the Imamat diplomatic status in Canada. The delegation in Ottawa is the representational office of the Ismaili Imamat to Canada and home to its representative. It also serves as the institutional headquarters of the Aga Khan Foundation in Canada. Other institutions were established, such as the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto, the Ismaili Centres in Toronto and in Vancouver, gardens and parks in Toronto and Edmonton, and the establishment of the Global Centre for Pluralism in partnership with the government. All these designed to bring people together. Globally, the Aga Khan Foundation Canada works hand in hand with Global Affairs Canada, bringing help and hope to some of the world's most vulnerable and marginalized populations. Internationally, His Highness has been recognized by heads of state, universities, and other organizations around the world. Here in Canada, former Governor General Adrian Clarkson presented him the Order of Canada. Prime Minister Stephen Harper made him an honorary citizen and invited him to address the joint houses of Parliament.
Central to my life has been a verse in the Holy Quran, which addresses itself to the whole of humanity. It says, "O mankind, fear your Lord, who created you of a single soul, and from it created its mate, and from the pair of them scattered abroad many men and women. I know of no more beautiful expression about the unity of our human race, born indeed from a single soul. Thank you.
The suspense builds. I wanted more. I wanted more. Well, we're going to get more. Yeah, we can clap. A lot of work went into that compilation. We're going to get into more about identity and what home means. So allow me to set up our panel, and I'll introduce our panelists one by one, and then I'll invite you all to join us on stage. To introduce, first and foremost, Senator Mobina Jaffer. Senator Jaffer represents the province of British Columbia in the Senate of Canada. Appointed to the Senate on June 13th, 2001 by Prime Minister John Chrétien, she is the first Muslim senator, the first African-born senator, and the first senator of South Asian descent. Among her many admirable accomplishments, Senator Jaffer served as Canada's Special Envoy for Peace in Sudan from 2002 to 2006, and from 2002 to 2005, she chaired the Canadian Committee on Women, Peace, and Security. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Arran Stevens has been at the leading edge of the organic food movement for most of his 7 decades. He and wife Ratana co-founded Nature's Path Organic Foods in 1985 with roots going back to Goldstream Berry Paradise, the family farm on Vancouver Island, where Arran and older brother Godfrey were raised by their mom and dad, Gwen and Rupert. Arran pursued a career in fine arts through painting and poetry and had 2 major exhibitions before age 21. After returning from 7 transformative months in India with his revered meditation teacher, Sant Kirpal Singh Ji Maharaj, starting with only $7, he established Canada's first vegetarian restaurant in 1967 that over 3 decades served millions of meals. In 1968, he returned to India, was introduced to and married Ratana, and in 1971, he opened Lifestream Natural Foods, which became Canada's largest natural organic foods company. After a partnership impasse that led to its sale in 1981, Arran and Ratana went on to found Nature's Path out of the back of their restaurant and then bought back Lifestream from Kraft Philip Morris in 1995. Arran, thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you for giving me 10 extra years.
Oh.
Actually, it's more like 8 decades.
8 decades. Bonus. The gift that keeps on giving. Arran Stevens. And last but definitely not least, Sirish Rao. He's the Director of Public Engagement and Learning at the Vancouver Art Gallery, Western Canada's largest public art museum. And his mandate is to give human shape to the gallery's mission to create, through art, paths to share perspectives, build and engage communities, and shape our collective future together. And prior to this, Sirish co-founded and steered the Indian Summer Festival of Arts and Ideas with his partner Laura, which they grew over 12 years into Canada's preeminent presenter of South Asian art and thought. The festival's roster included Nobel Booker, Oscar, and Grammy Award-winning artists alongside emerging talent. Sirish serves on the board of directors of the Vancouver Foundation and the Vancouver Film Festival. He is a member of the advisory board for the Chan Centre for the Performing Arts at the University of British Columbia and is the co-chair of Simon Fraser University's India Advisory Council. It's a Power Pack panel. At this point, let's give a warm welcome to all 3 panelists, and I invite you to join us here on stage.
Okay. Everyone hear me? Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Thanks everyone for this incredibly warm welcome. And it's my honor to be seated here with Senator Mobina Jaffer and with Arran Stephens. Thank you both for being here. We've seen the political and social context to why we're here today, so beautifully portrayed in those videos and indeed in the exhibition that I hope everyone gets a chance to see. And we are here speaking of home, of migration, of belonging on the traditional and unceded ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam people here. And so in that context, in the area that has been stewarded, has been loved and cared for and protected by Indigenous peoples, we come from other worlds and make our home here. Now, the idea of home, of course, is not just a question of geography or of structure, but home implies belonging. Home implies safety. Home implies where one can extend hospitality. And I think these are the things that I want to explore with these two esteemed people here. And their presence is not, of course, an accident, because home is also created by political will and by action and policy. And home always means food. And home always means culture. And I hope that between us we can explore these three aspects of belonging and home. It is fitting, of course, in the Ismaili Centre that we should invoke His Highness the Aga Khan. The concept of pluralism, as you'd have seen, is something very dear to his heart. And the Centre for Pluralism is an actual institution that serves as a think tank to really explore what pluralism means. And I want to read what he said 20 years ago in a speech at the Museum of Civilization. He said, "Pluralism means peoples of diverse backgrounds and interests coming together in organizations of varying types and goals for different kinds and forms of creative expression, which are valuable and deserving of support by government and by society as a whole." And he said that he deeply believes that the collective conscience must accept that pluralism is no less important than human rights for ensuring peace, democracy, and equality of life. So that was one sort of pillar that I wanted to use to set up. And the other is a story which I loved so much. It's kind of a founding myth of the Parsi community. The Parsis came from Persia, Iran, were Zoroastrians fleeing religious persecution. And it's said that they arrived in India, in Gujarat, where a lot of folks who are Ismaili trace their roots as well, and met the king at that time, King Jadhav Rana, who in the cryptic and mysterious ways of kings in stories, when met with a delegation, did not say that I have no space for you. He simply offered a cup of milk that was filled to the brim. And that implied that my kingdom is full. There's no room for anyone else. The leader of the Parsis slipped a spoonful of sugar into that full cup of milk and said, "We won't spill it over, we'll just sweeten it." And I just wanted those two to guide us, as sort of two ways of looking as a backdrop. And with that backdrop, I wanted to ask you both to tell us a little about your founding story. Take us into the journey of your life, and please take the long and winding road. We'd love to hear what we start with Senator Jaffer, please. Okay, Mobina.
It's a real honor to be here. Sorry, you told me. Can you hear me? Yeah? It's a real honor to be here, and it's so nice to see you all. And Yali Madat, and good afternoon. When you asked me, Suresh, to talk about home, I really had to reflect. Because home, you obviously think, where do you live at this point? But I've had 5 homes, and I want to explain. My first home is my mosque, my Jamaat Khana. Anywhere in the world I go, you get a sanctuary, you get love, you get fed. So for me, even when we first came from Uganda, I really found that that was my first home. And in Uganda, we had a most beautiful Jamaat Khana, and I'm biased, but I think it's still one of the best. And so that was my first home. And then, of course, Uganda was where I was born, and I have lots of love for Uganda, and I always will. And there was a short time when I didn't like Uganda because we were thrown out, and I was very angry. And my dad always used to say it was one man throwing you out, not the people. And so now I've gone back many times, and I have a real love for it. It's a place where the Aga Khan built schools for us all. We had secondary, primary, kindergarten schools. I attended all. And my father ran for parliament. He was the first Asian parliamentarian. And, you know, it's a place that I still feel it's my home. And then you know, wherever you go, even in Uganda, we were thrown out because many of you, or some of you will know the word Muhindi. We were Indian, and so we were thrown out. And in the end, wherever we went, we was said, you know, Indians go, you know, leave Uganda. So, and we were always brought up as Indians as well. And I am an Indian, and I'm proud to be an Indian. And I love everything about India too. And even though I've not lived in India for long periods, I've lived in India. The last trip I went with my friend Patsy, my sister, Patsy George. And so I have I feel it's home because when I walk in India, nobody calls me the other. Nobody calls me Indian. I am Indian. And that's why it gives me solace. It's where I belong. So for me, that is also home. And of course now, Canada. And I could go on and on about what Canada has done for me and for all of us here. And you know, Canada has become a place where we truly belong. And my father being a politician, he had choices of going to Australia, US, and he decided to come to Canada. He'd been to Canada before, and he said, this is a country of immigrants. Nobody can throw another immigrant out. It's possible, but it's a wish, it's a wisdom, it's a choice. And so this is our home, and it's given us, you know, my children are born here, and well, I've lived here 50 years, the longest I've lived everywhere, so it's obviously my home. But all four of them make it 5. My first home is Jamaat Khana, then Uganda, India, and Canada, and all 4 of them make my 5 fingers because they are all mixed up in where my home is.
That's beautiful, thank you. RNG, the wandering soul.
I want to thank you all for inviting us here to your Jamaat Khana. Ya Alimad. Home is where the heart is. When I went to India in 1967, I felt like I'd come home. I really felt like I'd come home. And when I came back, I first landed in New York City. 7 months later, I spent 7 months first time in India, 6 months the second time, 5 months the third time, and many times since. But it's interesting, you know, sitting at the feet of my murshid, or my guru, in 1967, he said, "You look like a Pathan." Pathans are these tall, fair-skinned people from the mountainous area north of India. He said, "Are you a Muslim? Are you a Hindu? Are you a Sikh? Are you Christian? Who are you?" And I didn't have words to answer. And he said, he joked, he said, he was born in the West by mistake. So I was very fortunate to have met the woman who became such a huge part of my life in 1969. She's sitting right here, Ratna. This story is also about her. And we had an arranged marriage and fell in love in that order. Came back to Canada, started a life together and many struggles. And over the decades, we built a family, we built a community, and we built a business, which today employs about 750 people. So we're very grateful to Canada and to the world and to all the citizens of the world. But maybe later on I can just elaborate more. I don't want to take up too much time. Thank you.
No, not at all. And Arranji, I've been to India with you. The way you sit inside an auto rickshaw, sideways, pointing your finger out, hands out at the street, makes you Indian, for sure. Certified. You have to have a certain attitude to ride in an auto rickshaw properly. So, no, thank you for that. And given both your journeys, I just wanted to ask you both, how have those journeys affected the work you do in the world? And Mobina, whenever one introduces you, there are a lot of firsts. The first Muslim senator, the first senator of African descent, the first who was born in Africa, the first South Asian senator. What was the social and political landscape when you were appointed to Senate, and where are we now? And could you tell us a little bit about that?
If you would allow me, I'd like to give a little further back. What was the landscape, in the sense that I'm a politician's daughter, and so politics was always in my heart. And I ran twice in Vancouver and lost. And so when I became a senator, I want to share this with you all. Prime Minister Chrétien called me and said to me, he was going to appoint a senator, and he said, I'm going to appoint you because I get 4 in 1. It's easy. Then nobody can say these groups are not represented. So the 4, he said, you're an African, Indian, the third thing I forget for a second, and he said that, and you're a woman, so 4 in 1. I get 4 in 1, and Ismaili, you said. I get 4 in 1, so it covers all my check signs. So that's why I'm appointing you, because he and I had a very close relationship, and so I, of course, was very excited, as anybody would be, and I called, as a daughter would, I called my dad. And my dad said to me, no, somebody's played a joke on you. And at that time, there was somebody that rang the Queen in Mr. Chrétien's name from Quebec. So he said, no, somebody's played a joke on you.
It is April 1st today. Yeah.
And he says, don't tell anybody. And I was so upset. I said, Dad, what do you mean? Anyway, he said, no, please don't tell anybody. So as a good girl, I listened, and I'm not often that. And Patsy will tell you that. So then he heard of my appointment at 1 on the radio, and then he called me and said, I was at the courthouse, I didn't speak to him till 4 o'clock. He said, now you can tell everybody, I heard it on the radio. So that was how I came to the Senate, in my opinion. But imagine, first Muslim senator, and a week before was 9/11. And the atmosphere for me to arrive in the Senate was not fun. It was very, very hard. And happily for me, I had been in the Liberal Party for many years. And so I had many friends, and Mr. Chrétien was my very good friend. But I found it very hard because it was like everywhere we would go, as if my husband, Norella, was here with me, and I were terrorists, more so him than I. And it was very uncomfortable. And after a week or so, I, as you were saying, what was the atmosphere like? I got the courage. First, I was just seething. I got the courage to speak. We have caucuses for the different groups. And I got up and told everybody how I felt. And there was complete silence. And these were my friends whom I'd worked with for a long time, but there was complete silence. I don't know what they were thinking, but I think they were thinking, maybe we have to rethink it. But I don't know if they really rethought it or just thought, oh, we feel bad for Mobina. I don't know what it was, because a lot of those policies have continued. But then I insisted on being on the defense committee. And immediately we got the defense people. We were asking them questions about 9/11 and why there was no warning, et cetera, et cetera. And there was Chief Zach Adeli, who was the chief of police. It's the High Commissioner of Police. And he came in front of us, and I asked him about racial profiling. And he said, there's no profiling. You're mistaken. There's no racial profiling. I gave him examples of my husband. I gave him lots of examples. He was absolutely not. And he was a very, very, well, I better restrain. We didn't have a good exchange. And so then he sent his, to a private conversation, I would say something else, but he sent one of the people who was working with him to my office upstairs. The meetings were downstairs, and to my office upstairs. And the person started threatening me, saying, you stop talking about racial profiling. It does not exist. And you know, being a senator gave me the privilege to press the security button, and the security people took him away, to give the message that we had arrived, and you could not treat us like that. So those were my first few days in the Senate. I had a very tough time, and those who know me and those who will come to know me, I don't take things nicely if I'm not treated well. And I'll tell you, if I have a few more minutes, yeah? But from the time I was born, I was never the right color. I was sent to a white school because it was colonialism, and I was thrown out. So I built a thick skin, and it went on, and I was sent to America. I earned a scholarship to do high school in America. And everywhere I went, they would say, how can you be African? You're Indian. And it used to drive me crazy. When I ran for election, how can you be Canadian? You're Indian. And not the Indian part didn't drive me. It's not the belonging part that drove me crazy. And so I built a very thick skin. So I was just ripe to go into politics. And as Mr. Chrétien has many times told me, and so have my colleagues, we made a mistake in appointing you.
That's wonderful. It is true that if you're not irking at least a couple of people at any given time, you're not doing something right. So thank you for being there for us. Arran, you too have many firsts, and I'm wondering about, you had this interesting life between being in LA, where your dad was a songwriter after growing up on a farm, and then being in New York with Robert Rauschenberg and all those other people who were beginning a painting movement. Then you went to India and you started the first, possibly one of the first vegetarian restaurants in Canada with Ratnaji. Now we all, talk about organic food and plant-based diet, but that wasn't the case back then.
Well, some of the first were, I don't know, there were too many people in 1969 who brought back an Indian bride, because it was okay in Indian society for an Indian man to marry a white woman. It wasn't okay for an Indian woman to marry a white man, although I'm not exactly white. Anyway, just a little bit of history. It's interesting. In 1840, my great-grandfather, his name was J.M. Cripps, he was on the Duke of Buccleuch steamship that crashed in the Bay of Bengal. And they were taken off the ship by local sailors. And he made his way down to Calcutta. There he joined the Bengal Lancers, and he spent 38 years in India. During his junior career, he was official translator for Hindi, Urdu, Pashto, and Farsi. And then he learned Punjabi. So he was fluent in these 5 Indo languages. So then he rose up to become a general, a lieutenant general. Then he met his future wife, and they went back to India. And so my grandmother was born in Peshawar. And then she married Dr. Harold Stevens, my grandfather. Both of them died before I was born. So that's a little bit of, history going back quite a long time. And I'm, very proud of that history. And he did write a book called Recollections of My Indian Career. Another relative was Sir Stafford Cripps, who was the Exchequer, he was the Exchequer of England. And he and Churchill did not get along, because Churchill was a very good wartime leader, but a very bad in peacetime, and he was a racist as well. He caused a lot of grief in India and caused a lot of him and others just arbitrarily divided India and created East Pakistan and West Pakistan. And there was massive bloodshed. It was not a religious division, it was a political division. And Sir Stafford Cripps was a friend of Gandhi. He was a vegetarian. And he had led the Cripps Commission, which was sent over there to actually dismantle the British Raj. Anyway, what was the question?
Keep going. This is fascinating. I was wondering about you when you came here with the first vegetarian restaurant.
Well,
what did
the first. I don't know if I was the first. I was the first one to marry Ratna, and the last one. First vegetarian restaurant, first natural food store in Canada, first organic breakfast cereal certified company in North America, and there's a couple of others, but I can't really remember them right now. And I think we were the first husband and wife to get an honorary degree from University of Victoria, and also first husband and wife to get the Order of British Columbia.
I did notice the pin and was going to ask where you got it from.
Somebody asked, where can I buy one of these? Where can I get one of those? I like those. I said, well, you might be able to find them in a pin store for a couple of dollars or so, but it would take you a lifetime to get it, actually.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think it's interesting how, in a way, you've both been guided by your own histories, by ancestors who have left you with also some sort of map that you follow. I remember that you always said, your father said, always leave the earth better than you found it. And I think that's, I hear that in all the work you do. But coming back to those that wander, those that have 5 homes, those that belong and don't belong anywhere, I think that the number of people around the world living in countries in which they were not born is now 230 million. That makes people like us the 5th largest nation on earth if you put that together. So thought of that way, I mean, I'd like to ask each of you what you think that represents as an opportunity for a country like Canada, for a city like ours where the majority of people were not born here. The majority of people, and increasingly as we will see, I just think of Canada as historically, it's a blip, really, it's a work in progress. There's this sense that there's an established country and now people are arriving, but we're co-creating. And I wonder what you think about that.
You start. Well, I think of this in this way. We're all immigrants in this world. We came from the placeless. We came from somewhere else. We came from, I would say, a benign, benevolent creator. If I may quote, I'm getting philosophical here, but I'd like to quote Kabir Sahib, the great 15th century mystic poet whose poems are recited all over India and Pakistan and different places. So he said, Avle Allah noore upaya, khudrat ke sab bande, ek noor te sab jage upje, kaun bale kaun mande. From God or Allah came light. The light manifested the creation. One light is in all. And so if one light is in all, who can be called good and who can be called bad? So I see that we're, in a way, yes, we may have immigrated from one country or the other, but in reality, we all came from a divine origin, and we are down here playing out our role. And we've forgotten our home. Just like immigrants after 3rd, 4th generation, they forget the land that they were born in. in the same way, we've become acclimatized to this world and we have forgotten our own true home as well. So it's a bigger cosmic play than just having been relocated from one country to another, to me.
That's beautiful, and I think, you know, so many cultures feel that way. I remember reading, of course, growing up in India and growing up with Hindu mythology, I very much felt that. But then you hear that the Aztecs say that all of us are here as characters in a play that the gods are dreaming. And we're here for their amusement.
Sounds a bit like Shakespeare.
Yeah, when they wake up, we'll be gone. So, it does. But Mobina, I wonder what you think about this opportunity, about this country that is a creation progress.
So that's why I asked you to go before, because Arran, you'd give such a positive message. And I'm going through a really tough time in my life with the issue of immigration, especially to Canada. And I hope I'm not very negative, but I feel this way. And, you know, we're celebrating this, and this is a wonderful thing that, you know, happened to our community. And I always tell people that Ismailis, because of His Highness and the Aga Khan and his uncle, Prince Sadruddin, we were really, not just the Ismailis, all the Asian Ugandans that were brought here, we got the Cadillac treatment. But that doesn't exist for many. And at the moment, you know, I feel, and I'm really worried, that Canada is becoming inward-looking. Canadians are becoming inward-looking. Keeps me awake at night. And when President Biden came, I didn't sleep that night or 2 nights before because they closed Roxham Road, which is a very small road, and it was bringing people who were desperate. But worse than that, they made an agreement that any immigrant or any refugee that came to Canada from the United States would be sent back to the United States. And I have acted for many, many, many people because I used to do refugee work. They come to Canada for a reason, you know, and they desperately come to you. Almost they come as refugees from the US to Canada. But now, unfortunately, because of that agreement, which was when I was a young lawyer and even until recently, and I promise you I'll fight again, that agreement is very, very, is very, very harmful to refugees because it sends people who are desperate to come here. And I'll explain to you, have I a few minutes? And I'll explain to you why I say that. Sometimes people come to the United States through South America, you know, walking. We've heard about all those things, walking, or they come in different ways to the US. But in the US, they have tremendous problems. And then if we in Canada say that we cannot welcome you because US is a safe third country, which I will say it, I'm not so sure when it comes to refugees. I mean, you know, they detain children. We do as well, but not as much. And it just drives me crazy when I hear that children, young children, babies can be detained in the States, and sometimes here too. And we really have to think about where Canada's going, and we cannot be complacent and think, oh, we are in a comfortable place. We can close the door. And that's my worry. When Roxham Road closed, so maybe I'm deaf, but I didn't hear a big noise from Canadians, what are you doing? When the Safe Third World, Safe Country Agreement came, perhaps I didn't hear a great anger about what are we doing. And I'm really worried. I'll tell you, as a young lawyer, I used to go to Portland and Seattle and bring young people, persecuted people from different Central American countries like Salvador and Guatemala, because they would have been persecuted because of the gangs even in the United States. And so I used to go specifically because at that time they wouldn't be allowed in if I didn't go and get them. And I'm really worried that we have gone quiet. And we think that because it's a liberal government, I'm a very staunch liberal, because it's a liberal government, they're looking after our interests. The last thing I want to say to you is how Canada has treated Afghan refugees is appalling. It's just appalling. You know, I personally wrote to the Prime Minister, I'll start crying, and the minister, defense minister, not to let that plane, empty plane, the last Canadian plane that left. I had names of people that I would personally guarantee that I worked, feminist women with whom I have worked for many years, who were stuck, Afghan women who were stuck in Afghanistan, and they could have got themselves to the airport. They did, and the plane left without them. So if any of us, if what's happening to Afghanistan today, we as a community that have many, many Ismailis living there should really think as to how great an immigration policy. Now, please forgive me, I'm bringing a real pal here. I'm bringing a lot of upsetness here. I don't mean to. But when I see this, I am very proud. His Highness has done a tremendous job for me. I'm forever grateful for what I've got, all the support from the day I was almost born till now. You know, I'm very, very blessed. So, but there are many, many more. So forget about 220. I'd be just happy if we brought 1 million. And so
We need them. We need them here in Canada.
Absolutely. I'm a farmer, and we can't get help on our farm. So I'm saying to you that when we go home tonight, do me a favor. Look up a little bit and write to our Prime Minister that we are not happy with what's happening with our immigration policy.
May I make a suggestion? Would you, Senator Mobina ji, would you draft a letter for all of us, and we will sign it? Draft a petition?
No. No. I don't believe in petitions.
No?
Because the petitions come to Parliament and they stay, and they just stay. If a person just writes a letter, if I've got to you at all, just write a letter from your heart saying that today, I'm just going to give an example. Today we celebrated in the Ismaili Mosque Center 50 years since we've been here. And our brothers and sisters who have very, very compelling cases, especially the women, sorry, I'm very biased, especially the women, why are you closing the doors on them? Why? And the way Afghan refugees are treated is just appalling. You know, months and months and years, no, even you don't get an answer from, even a senator doesn't get an answer on a particular case. So I'm saying to you, and I'm sorry, I brought the festive feeling today down. Forgive me, President, I didn't mean to. Is that we really need to think. So I say to you, please, let us celebrate today. Please celebrate with us because we are very fortunate that we are Canadians. But I really need to think, when you say 220, how many of them will now come to Canada? Yeah. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. And it's not the Paul. In fact, I think it's so important that you remind us that a certain smugness can set in, and any society is not an arrived state. I think you're telling us that we must work, we must be alert, and it's constantly something that requires protection, that requires questioning, and that requires people like you to point to where the flaws are. So thank you so much for that.
No, that's what I'm saying, Sirish. Maybe I didn't express it. It can't be just one or two. Canada belongs to all of us. Yeah. We all have to be outraged.
Exactly.
I think just to make it easy for all of us, because we're all very, very busy people, speaking personally, and if you or someone could draft a letter, and then we can adapt it ourselves. If we have that little template that we can use, and then we'll send it to our MPs, our local MP, Our MP is a Liberal, Joyce Murray, an old friend. In fact, her first job was with me when she was a teenager. So definitely, we'll reach out to our MPs and to the Prime Minister. Thank you.
Thank you.
But I'll leave you with a little bit of job. Would you do that? Thank you.
Well, I think I wanted to move on to another topic that I know that has been also very close to your heart. Just yesterday, we got word that you've been, for years now, pushing for the International Mother Language Day to be recognized. And yesterday you got some traction. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because you can't talk about home without talking about language.
Well, I truly believe that a person, if you speak to a person in their language, you get to their hearts. So I'll give you an example. The Prime Minister appointed me envoy to the Sudan. And when I would go to the Sudan and I would meet with the Sudanese, and I would say, I don't know much, but I would say a few words in Arabic. I got to their heart. There were many people who also spoke Swahili, and I can speak Swahili. I got to their heart. And I think that we are a country that has, I forget today, but we are a country that has, somebody here will tell me, we are a country, do you know?
60 indigenous languages, I think.
16 indigenous, and how many other languages? Third word.
Probably something like at least 45 major ones.
Yeah. I think there's even more than that. Yeah. It's just gone, I've just forgotten that. And so I feel that we should absolutely celebrate English and French, but we should also, part of my bill is to celebrate indigenous languages. We should encourage our children and us to learn indigenous languages, and we should also celebrate the mother tongues of all Canadians. And it was a very simple idea. I just thought that this is easy. It'll go through, but I won't give names. But a certain minister absolutely opposed me. And if you want to come and ask me, I'll tell you. And because it's being taped. But a certain minister absolutely opposed me. And I just told her, I will be here after you've left your job. So you keep opposing me. And she has left her job, and my bill, yesterday, it went to the Senate, it took 4 years. I tried 5 times to get that bill accepted, and after 4 years, I got it through, and then 2 years in the House of Commons, and yesterday evening, it became a bill, and soon there'll be royal assent, and now we will have a mother language bill.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that work. It's amazing, and I think what's so crucial is that the bill says this, but I think what it implies is that language, to borrow a phrase from Wade Davis, is the old growth forest of the mind. And when we lose a language, which we do every day, we lose 4 languages in the world. There were 7,500 languages in the 15th century, and now there's half of that. They don't die by accident. They die because there's no policy to protect them. They died through war, through economic advantage, through colonialism. So I think it really recognizes that we are losing our own human biodiversity when we do that. So thank you so much for pushing that through.
So to give an example, and I might be over, to give you an example that in BC today, there are some indigenous communities that only 6 people can speak the language, and of that, only 2 or 3 elders can speak it. And this is in BC. We are such a rich country. How are we letting that happen? For me, if I am speaking to somebody who knows Kutchi or Gujarati or Swahili, I'm speaking from my heart. I'm able to express myself better. And when you deny me my language, and also the celebrating of my language, you are denying me who I am. And imagine what we are doing to indigenous people. And that's another thing, a challenge that I give to you. Contact your education ministers in BC and challenge them to help indigenous languages survive.
Thank you. I wanted to say that there is another language. That language is a visual language that has no words. And RNG, apart from everything else, as someone who has been responsible for a huge movement in the way we grow and consume our food, is also a painter. And like this nation that's a work in progress, he's shared with us a work in progress that he was up all night last night finishing so that he could actually show it to us today. This is a painting titled The Conference of the Birds. RNG, could you tell us a bit more about it?
Can I? Sorry, I don't mean to take it. But not only did he go work till midnight, he also got up at 6 and worked, and he said it's still work in progress, but this is on Conference of the Birds, and if you go to our literature counter, you will find that book. It's a really amazing book. Read it now.
Dhanyavad, shukriya. Well, there was a great mystic in it's not Nuristan.
Attar.
No. Anyway, it was Attar, Nishapur. Yes, he was raised in Nishapur. He was not one of these who lived in a cave and practiced meditation. He was a man who was very active in his community. He was known as Attar, which means perfume or perfumer. He was a herbalist. He was a doctor, an indigenous doctor in his area, and was very famous for his cures and things that he was able to bring about. So he was a practical mystic, and he was. It is said that when Rumi was a baby, that Attar held Jalaluddin Rumi, the great mystic and poet, was one of my favorite poets. And he wrote this book called Conference of the Birds. And it's about the little humble hoopoe bird. It's a bird a little bit bigger than a robin, a very beautiful bird. It's mentioned in the Quran, it's mentioned in the Bible, which was the guide of Solomon. I believe it was Solomon. And Sulaiman. So the hoopoe, she called all the birds together, tens of thousands of birds, the owls, the ducks, the swans, the hawks, the eagles, And she told them about the king of all birds, the Samurg. And he said, it is our destiny to find the Samurg. We need to go in search of the Samurg, because if we find him, then we will find the answer to all of life's mysteries and questions. And all the birds, they had their objections, They made excuses as to why they couldn't undertake this journey. But one by one, the humble hoopoe, she convinced each and every one of the birds to undertake this journey. But it was a perilous journey, and they had to pass through 7 valleys. So this book is a book about philosophy, about life, about the great lessons of life and spirituality. And the first valley they have to cross is the valley of the quest, the quest, the search. The search has to begin. And search leads to understanding, and then the search leads to love, and the search leads to bewilderment, and it leads to ecstasy, and then the last valley, the 7th valley, is the valley of death, which is the death of the lower self. So finally, the hoopoe comes to that place. They say the Samurg, lives in the Kaf Mountains, the highest of all mountains, and it's a very perilous journey. So one by one, the birds dropped out of the search. In the end, only 30 birds remained. It's interesting that the word Samurg, which means the king of birds, is comprised of 2 words in Farsi, which means 30, and murg, which means bird, 30 birds. And when the little hoopoe flies up to meet the great Samurg, looks into his eyes, what does she behold? Who does she see? She sees herself, the true self, that God and the self are one and the same. So that's kind of the allegory. And I tried, nobody knows what Attar, Fariduddin Attar, what he looked like, but I've just, because that was the kind of the dress of the time. They would often wear turbans, and the men had beards. And so he's kind of looking down on his creation. This painting, by the way, is not anywhere nearly finished. It's been 3 years in the making, so it's a lot of detail, but it still has a long way to go, just like the painter has got a long way to go. So this is a little bit about the story of the Conference of the Birds. And as I said earlier, we've all come from our ultimate manzil, our ultimate destination. We're down here as immigrants in this world. And in this world, we have to deal with politicians and strong men and racism and all kinds of things. And I remember the time when Ratna was pregnant with our third daughter, Jyoti. She was at St. Paul's Hospital. And this florid-faced British man came up and she said, "Why don't you go back to Pakistan, you bloody Paki?" You know? So she faced that racism, and that was back in 1976 or 77. We've come a long way from there, but never take it for granted, because those who forget the lessons of history are bound to repeat them, right? That's what I wanted to say. So thank you so much for pinpointing that the fight's not over, and never give up. And you had to use your political clout to make these injustices known. Thank you.
Thank you. I think meeting the Samurg is a wonderful way to conclude our conversation, and I really want to thank you both so much for taking us to both those places, the place where we must act in policy and in politics and in civil society, and the place that we must find that we all come from and that we all must never forget that we reach. And in some ways, you know, to me, this work and what Athar is trying to do is to say that the process of understanding the world is unique. Every one of these birds will take its own way, that the truth evolves as we evolve along that journey. And I mean, I think in a sense that those who are trapped in their dogma and stick too hard to their faith maybe don't get to see the real divine ocean. But
They get lost in the husks.
They get lost in the husks. But I think what it does say is that perhaps we can take flight together. And I thank you. I thank you for giving us this gift of having worked all of last night to bring this to us. And I thank you all for staying with us through this conversation and really for the opportunity to be with you today. And really warm thanks to you both.
Thank you so much.
Panelists, thank you so much. That was enlightening on so many levels, and I love the action we can take walking out of this, not just the inspiration on the panel, so thank you. You're going to get the chance. This is a self-guided exhibit, so you will have the chance to take a look at some of these panels. I do want to point out the two panels on the back. There is an audience activation, so you can write whatever has inspired you in this space and post that on the wall. We encourage you to do that. And definitely share your thoughts of what came out. Sirish, you gave some great closing remarks. Is there any final thought you'd like to give the audience, knowing you were the curator of this discussion here today?
I mean, really only my gratitude, President Manji, for welcoming and hosting us here today. You've always been such a great, gracious, and wonderful partner in creating culture in this city. So thank you for that. Farooq Manji, who has been so instrumental, really, in reaching out to so many communities in the city. I mean, your large-heartedness has been known by many people, so thank you for that. Shelina, I think you've done so much to get the word out about this, and Riaz, our host, and everyone at the Ismaili Centre, I know consists of a lot of volunteerism. Just deep thanks and gratitude for your presence here and for your kindness.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You make my job easy. Thanks so much. Right? That's what's left to say, really. Again, a big shout out to the volunteers for making today a reality. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for participating and being a part of this conversation here today. My name is Riaz. Enjoy the tour. And thank you again to our panelists and Sirish for guiding the discussion. Thank you so much.